Of course, she lied about never having Googled Harry when she gave an interview early on. We know from her friends that's not true.
Sources say the Duke of Sussex has snapped, emotionally, privately, and perhaps even publicly. The mask is cracking. The calm, California image of mindfulness and healing? It's slipping. It's happening again. But this time, it's not Meghan under fire. It's Harry. Because when Tom Bower speaks, people listen. His latest wave of revelations hasn't just shaken the palace. It's rattled the man who walked away from it. Prince Harry, stripped of royal duty but still chained to royal scandal, has finally hit a wall. And behind that unraveling is a single, haunting question. Did Harry give up everything for someone who never told him the full truth? Stay with me, because this isn't just another royal feud. This is the sound of a man realizing the palace wasn't his prison, his choices were. Let's start with the spark. Because this wasn't just another headline, this was a detonation. Tom Bower's latest revelations didn't just revisit Meghan's past, they ripped the bandages off wounds Harry thought had long since healed. Every page, every quote, every whispered claim reopened the story he's been trying to rewrite for years. The one where love conquered duty, where he was the brave one who broke free. But Bower doesn't write fairy tales. He writes autopsies. And this time, the body on the table was Harry's own narrative. Bower, never one to mince words, painted Meghan as calculating, image-obsessed, and ruthlessly ambitious, a woman who measured relationships not by emotion, but by opportunity. He described her as someone who treated people like stepping stones across a river, necessary for the crossing, but easily forgotten once she reached the other side. And for Harry, that narrative cut deeper than any tabloid ever could. Because suddenly, it wasn't just Meghan's ambition under scrutiny, it was his judgment. The world began asking uncomfortable questions. Did Harry marry a partner or a brand? A soulmate or a strategist? And worst of all, was he the final glittering piece in a long game of reinvention? Insiders say that when those headlines hit, Harry's reaction wasn't calm or composed. It was volcanic. Not at Bower, he's used to critics, but at Meghan for handing them ammunition on a silver platter. At the palace for their smug, knowing silence. And most painfully to himself for realizing the man who once mocked the press, who once prided himself on rebelling against it, is now completely enslaved by it. Because this time, he isn't the one telling the story. He is the story. And that, for Harry, is the most terrifying truth of all. Let's be honest, Harry was supposed to have escaped all this. The cameras, the constant scrutiny, the suffocating expectations of the firm. He wasn't supposed to be another royal casualty of the tabloids. He was supposed to beat them. When he packed his bags and crossed the Atlantic, it wasn't rebellion, it was survival. California was meant to be a sanctuary. A sun-soaked chapter of peace, privacy, and purpose. A place where he could finally breathe without headlines defining every exhale. But what did he really get? A Netflix deal that feeds on the very royal drama he once claimed to despise. A tell-all memoir that turned family wounds into best-selling chapters. And a wife who, love her or loathe her, seems as at home under studio lights as she once was in palace corridors. What began as freedom slowly morphed into a new kind of prison. This one isn't built from duty, but from exposure. The spotlight doesn't fade, it just changes filters. Instead of palace guards and royal advisors, there are producers, agents, and publicists, each one crafting, editing, and selling the next version of Harry and Meghan. Sources close to him say he's exhausted, like a man realizing that no matter how far he runs, the chase follows. Every interview, every documentary, every whisper about Meghan's past feels like a reminder that California isn't an escape, it's a stage. And the script keeps changing without his consent. The worst part, after Bower's bombshells, that stage suddenly feels hostile. The applause has turned to murmurs, the sympathy to suspicion. In the public eye, he's no longer the rebel prince who broke free. He's the punchline. The hero of his own story has been recast. And the role he's playing now isn't the one he thought he signed up for. Now let's talk about what Bower revealed, because that's where the real tension ignited.
Harry is a very complicated person because he's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by the early death of his mother, Diana.
According to his sources, Meghan's early days in Hollywood weren't the story of a struggling actress chasing her dreams. They were the story of a strategist. Someone who networked with precision, who studied the room before she entered it, and who knew exactly who could open the next door. She wasn't drifting through social circles, she was climbing them. And when she met Harry, that ladder led straight to Buckingham Palace. Bauer's sources painted a picture that was anything but romantic. They claimed her friendships with A-listers weren't strokes of luck, they were deliberate alignments. Each connection, each event, each introduction, carefully curated. And when parts of her past no longer fit the new image, they were quietly left behind. Her Toronto friends, her ex-husband, even colleagues who once spoke highly of her, they all faded from view as the royal chapter began. For Harry, those allegations weren't just damaging, they were deeply personal. Because if even a sliver of it was true, then the question became painful. Was he the great love of her life, or simply the grand finale of a long, calculated ascent? Insiders claim that realization has haunted him. Behind closed doors, they say the mood has shifted. Harry, more reserved, more withdrawn. Meghan, meanwhile, is said to be doubling down, focusing on the brand, the image, the comeback. She's lining up new projects, reconnecting with power players, and rebranding herself as a global advocate, strong, independent, unstoppable. But as one insider put it bluntly, Harry's starting to wonder what's real anymore. Because when love and ambition collide, truth becomes the first casualty.
She had no money. She had no future after the Suits series in Canada. And suddenly she's an international star.
Back in London, the royal family's silence has been deafening. No statements, no denials, no sympathy, just quiet observation, an eerie stillness that says more than any press release ever could. It's as if the palace has decided to let time and truth do what they always do: expose, erode, and eventually settle the dust. William, some insiders say, saw this coming long before the rest of us. He understood the pattern, the headlines, the emotional interviews, the Netflix confessions. He knew that the cycle of grievance would eventually turn inward. That's why he created distance early. That's why Catherine never engaged, even when she was accused on global television of making Meghan cry. Because silence, in the long game of royal survival, isn't weakness, it's strategy. And now, as Bauer's words ripple through the press, the palace does not need to issue rebuttals or clarifications. They don't need to fight back, because Harry is doing it for them, unintentionally. Through frustration, through public tension, through the cracks showing in his once serene California calm. The man who once vowed to build a new life free from royal constraints now finds himself haunted by the shadows of the one he left behind. Each bridge he burned, whether with family, with friends, or with the British press, is now smoldering quietly behind him. And the worst part, there's no clear path back across. Not to the palace that raised him, not to the press that once adored him, and perhaps not even to the version of himself he believed he could become. Because in the end, exile isn't just about leaving a place, it's about losing a sense of belonging. And in Harry's case, it seems both are slipping further away with every headline. Every man has his breaking point. And for Harry, it didn't come with a dramatic argument or a front-page scandal. It came with a quiet, devastating realization. Friends say the outburst wasn't explosive. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no tears for the cameras. Just a moment of silence, a heavy sigh, and the look of someone who suddenly sees the full picture and doesn't like what he's looking at. It wasn't rage. It was resignation. A slow, painful understanding that maybe he'd traded one kind of confinement for another. That the freedom he thought he'd found had been packaged, scripted, and sold, piece by piece, to the same media machine he once despised. Sources close to Harry say he's begun revisiting everything. The Oprah interview, the moment that was supposed to reclaim his voice. The memoir that promised healing, but reopened wounds. The Netflix deals, the endless press cycles, the brand built on confession and catharsis. He's asking himself the question he's avoided for years. Was any of it worth it? Because when your entire narrative hinges on authenticity, and the world starts doubting your sincerity, what's left to stand on? What happens when the truth becomes a commodity, and your pain becomes content? One insider summed it up with brutal clarity. Harry's tired of being the villain in someone else's redemption arc. And maybe for the first time, he's beginning to see the pattern. That the real prison was never firm, it was the story. A story that cast him as the wounded prince, the rebel son, the husband who saved his wife from the monarchy's cruelty. But what happens when that story stops selling? When the world moves on and you're left with the silence? For Harry, the cage was never built by courtiers or crowns. It was built out of expectations, narratives, and the image of a man who thought he'd escaped, only to realize he was still performing, just on a different stage. Public sympathy for Meghan and Harry isn't just fading, it's evaporating. The Netflix glow that once painted them as Hollywood's royal rebels has dimmed. The Spotify deal that promised a global platform for their voices? Gone. The carefully crafted image of a modern, liberated power couple? Cracking under the weight of exhaustion and overexposure. Every new project feels like déjà vu. The same grievances, the same confessions, the same headlines. And people are tuning out. Behind closed doors, whispers of financial strain and creative tension have started circulating. Insiders hint that their lifestyle, the private jets, the Montecito mansion, the constant PR battles, is becoming harder to sustain without new wins. And when you combine dwindling public interest with private disillusionment, you don't just get drama. You get instability. You get the perfect storm. Because here's the terrifying what if. What happens if Harry's loyalty finally snaps? If the man who once defended Meghan at every turn, who cut ties with family, friends, and duty to stand beside her, stops believing in the story? Imagine the fallout if Harry ever speaks without the filter of love, without the palace's control, without Meghan's influence. Another memoir, another interview, another camera, only this time, the words don't protect her. They expose her. That wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be seismic. Because Harry's voice was always Meghan's greatest shield. The one thing that kept public sympathy from turning into public backlash. And if that shield fractures, the entire brand collapses. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Tom Bauer saw coming. Not just the scandal, but the implosion. The quiet, inevitable collapse of a story that began as a fairy tale and ended as a cautionary tale. So here we are. Prince Harry, the runaway royal, the rebel son, the devoted husband, standing in the ruins of a life he thought he chose freely. The palace won't say a word. Catherine won't look back. And Meghan? She's already on to the next chapter. But Harry? He's staring at the mirror, realizing that the greatest betrayal wasn't the one done to him. It's the one he helped create.